Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. I begin in the name of Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful. So thank you to the program committee for allowing me to speak and inviting me. And I wanted to start by just explaining a little bit about my topic, and later on there's something more that will come that will also clarify why I chose Do You Hear Me, Do You See Me? So communication is a broad topic, so to cover communication in one lecture would never happen. So I wanted to give you guys something specific that was based on data and based on research, and something also, one or two things that you can specifically take home with you today that you can start working on and that you can start to implement in all kinds of relationships. So just not only your marriage. I think that at least one or two of these skills that I'm going to give to you today are applicable with our relationships with our children, with our coworkers, with our friends. So I hope that I will give you something specific to take home with you today. So I want you to imagine this. Imagine you're at home and all around you there's cameras, and there are people watching you and recording your every move and everything that you're saying. So they're recording your conversations with your spouse, they're recording your conversations with your children. So this is exactly what 130 couples, they agreed to do this in what was called the Love Lab. So John Gottman, he's a research psychologist, and around the 1972s, he was looking at what research there was to show why divorce was occurring and how to prevent divorce. And this information was not out there. At least it wasn't out there in the form of statistics and data and numbers that he was looking for. There were general theories, but no one had really done any kind of extensive research to say, what exactly breaks a marriage or what exactly keeps a marriage going. So his research is based at the University of Washington, Seattle, and this particular research is around 16 years of accumulated research. They did the Love Lab where they had 130 couples. They stayed overnight. There were cameras that were watching their every move. They would be watched from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. when they went to sleep, or they went to use the restroom. They had 15-minute breaks where they would not be recorded. And then there were people that kind of dissected every move they made, followed them afterwards to ask and look at the question, who stayed together, who broke apart, and then formulate their theories of, again, why some marriages will break and some marriages will really last a lifetime. And also, some of the things that I'll talk about, it's research not only based from the 16 years, but they've been looking at several couples for over 40 years now. So it is a whole lot of research that they've done, and they're presenting their findings based on this research. Okay, so there's John and Julie Gottman. These are the research psychologists, and they're the ones that who interviewed the couples. They were really thorough in their research, and they really, especially John Gottman, he's a little bit more towards the research. Julie Gottman is a little bit more on the clinical side, which means that she enjoys a little bit of the face-to-face therapy with the actual couples. And John really loves the statistics, and he has written several books that some of which I'm using in my material today. So they would, measure their heart rate, measure their blood flow, their sweat output. They measured their white blood count cells. So, and over the 40 years, they have researched, or they have interviewed more than 650 couples, which is quite a lot in the world of research. I mean, to get, 650 couples to let you evaluate, that's a lot. That's amazing. It's hard getting couples to come in to talk to you about their lives. So, and after this research, they also founded their therapy model, which is called the Gottman therapy model, and they gave these skills to the couples to then evaluate like what was working, what wasn't working, what were the rates of success after they implemented some of these strategies. Okay, so now once again, I want you to imagine you're in your living room and you're having a conversation with your spouse. And John and Julie Gottman are in front of you, and they're listening to what you're saying, and you're having a conversation about, a difficult topic that's that you need to discuss with your spouse. And within 4 minutes of you and your spouse talking, they can tell you whether or not you're headed for the divorce court. So 91% is the accuracy of how they can predict if you and your marriage will last or if you will head to divorce court. So for me, that's pretty amazing in one way and scary all at the same time. So we'll look at, what is it that they're looking at in within these 4 minutes that they can tell right away that this couple is doomed or this couple is really going to make it. So let's quickly just look at the numbers. So the numbers are that within a 40-year period, there is a 67% chance of divorce, which is pretty scary to think that somebody could be married 20 years and 30 years and still have a more than 0.5% chance of getting divorced. And I know that I have seen it with people I know, and I'm sure that you've also seen it with the people you know. So, it doesn't just go away within, the first critical years. The second thing is, what are the first critical years? According to their research, they said that the first critical years are the first 7 years. So within the first 7 years, there is more than 50%, like the divorce, the people that divorced, it happened in the first 7 years of their marriage. So that tends to be kind of the number thrown around as far as the first critical years of your marriage. If you can get over the first 7 years of your marriage, then you've made it. And another information to look at is the couples that divorced and got remarried. So we would think that, hey, you learned your lesson, you are going to learn to do it better. Unfortunately, what they found is that second marriages have a 10% higher chance of divorce. So it gets worse if you try to do it again. And I also tried to look at what are the divorce rates in the US for Muslims. There is not a lot of information, and I didn't try to comb through everything to see what kind of research there is. And what I did find is this older article around the early 2000s where they said that there was some statistics in the 90s that said that Muslims in North America have a 31% divorce rate, which is lower than if we say like just the general North American population. It's still pretty high compared to the divorce rates in Muslim countries. So at that time, the worst divorce rates in a Muslim country was 10%, and it was for Turkey and Egypt. So the question is, why is it lower in the Muslim countries, or why is it higher here in North America for Muslims? And one possibility, and again, I didn't find any research on this, is that perhaps it's due to domestic violence. So one observation that somebody was telling me about is that when women and families move to North America, there's a shift in culture, and women are feeling more empowered. They have the ability to go out and work and take care of themselves, and they no longer have to live in fear of their culture and their families and their husbands. And so if they have tolerated domestic violence in their home countries where they may not have as many rights, or they may not have as many, the ease of access to divorce is not there, and it's greater here in the US, well, when they come to the US, maybe they are no longer willing to put up with the violence or the unstable homes, and then they are acting upon their wish to leave their marriage. So that may be one possible answer for those numbers. And since this rate comes from 1990s, we can predict that the numbers are going to be higher right now. Probably, who knows what the numbers are right now, but we know they've increased. So some of the questions they're looking at is, why is marriage tough at times? Why some relationships clicking and why others are ticking like a time bomb? And then, how do we prevent a relationship from disintegrating, and how, if the relationship is in trouble, how do we stop it from going bad? Okay, so why does this matter? Why should we care? If you're unhappy, why not get divorced? This is your right. Well, so the information I'm going to present to you here is not only about people, people who are married versus people who are divorced. There's a distinction between happy couples and happy marriages, happy families, versus the unhappy marriages. We know that a lot of people are living in marriages where, they're living in the same house, they are technically married, and a divorce has happened a long time ago. They've emotionally cut off from each other. They are no longer what we would call married, right? So they're in an unhappy, unsuccessful marriage. So why we should care is, first, it not only affects that relationship, it affects you individually. They found that people who are in unhealthy relationships, they get sicker more and they have shorter lifespans. So healthier people live longer, they're healthier, and they are generally doing better in life. And another thing that John Gottman likes to say is, if the fitness buffs who work out 2-3 hours at the gym, if they would only spend 20 minutes working on their relationship, they would get 3 times the health benefits of working out every day, trying to build those muscles or those abs or whatever your thing is. I think that the biggest impact is, go to the next slide. Is this last one here. It's our kids. The kids are getting the biggest hit in all of this. So no matter what, they are the ones that are getting the brunt of the negative consequences of a bad marriage as well as divorce. So divorce doesn't always mean a bad thing, but they are suffering from the consequences of a unhealthy and negative relationship, from an unhealthy home environment. And they followed children until the age of 15, and they found that children that are living in unhealthy homes, they have more truancy, peer rejection, behavior problems, including aggression, low school achievement, or even school failure. So they are suffering, and why care? We need to care because these are our children. They deserve it. They deserve a happier home. They deserve to have more chances and to have healthy lives. And also the idea here is that not to say that there's never a case for divorce. There may be a case for divorce, and sometimes going the route of divorce is going to be healthier for our family. There's been lots of children who say that life got better when my parents got divorced. And at the same time, most divorces, or a lot of divorces, probably occur when they could have been prevented. There is a course and a path of success of making your marriage and your relationships healthier. So there's absolutely a way to live a healthy and happy marriage and life without having to go the route of divorce. So some common myths about marriage. And I'm just going to quickly go through this. So some people believe that maybe personality disorders or psychological disorders may ruin marriage. Some people think that you have to have common interests and that's what's going to keep you together. That's not always true. Makes it easy to plan a vacation if you both want to go to the same place, and it's not going to keep a marriage together at the same time. So quid pro quo in marriage is needed. Again, that's not necessarily true. Avoiding conflict will ruin your marriage. affairs are the root cause of divorce. Affairs are usually a symptom that the marriage is already bad and then the affair happens. Men are not biologically built for marriage, so they are. Okay. So what are the signs? So the first one is called the harsh startup. So the question here to ask is, how are you starting your conversations? And this could be anything in general, like when you walk into the house, what's the first thing that you are going to say to your child or to your spouse? So I have an example that happened this past week. I was driving home, and sometimes if I have a feeling that my husband will go out, I like to call and check in and say, are you home? Are you out? And I called the first time, and I didn't get an answer. And then I waited a little while, and I called a second time, and I also didn't get an answer. So here I am, like panicking, like trying to make myself calm. They're safe. It's it's probably something he's busy with, and trying to make myself calm. I get home, and this is actually not a bad example. I was proud of myself. I walked in the home, and I did say, Assalamu alaikum, how are you doing? Did that, and then said, I called you 2 times, you didn't answer. And I know plenty of times where I have barged in at home and said, I called you, you didn't answer, what are you doing, right? So that's the idea, how are you starting the conversation? So if I had walked in this particular time and the first thing I would have said is, why didn't you pick up the phone? That's called a harsh startup. I'm already putting the other person in a defensive mode. I'm not starting off with the hello, how are you? So that's one sign that a couple will be headed for divorce. And it's also about not the words that you're saying. It can be your tone of voice, it can be a gesture, it can be expression. Another example is that your son comes home, and in the digital world, we get their grades before they had a chance to talk to us about it. And what are you going to say to them? Are you going to turn to them and say, without any salam, without any greeting, why did you fail that math test? Or are you going to ask them, how are you doing? What's going on with school? Are you liking school? Are you doing well? Do you need some help? Right, again, so this one we can particularly use with anyone, with coworkers, with our children, with our families. How are you starting your conversation? Second one, it's a 4-part where they call it the 4 horsemen, and I always have a hard time saying this, but it's the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I think I got that right. And so these are 4 things that they notice, and this is the really, really critical part of this sign, is that when they notice these 4 horsemen showing up, the prediction of divorce is at 82%. So just with this one sign, they can say that this couple is headed for divorce with 82% accuracy. So it's pretty critical here. First one is called criticism. So what is criticism? Criticism is a personal attack on a person, and it's an attack on their person's character or their personality. So we're human beings. We're going to have complaints. We're going to have requests that we want to make, and we are going to like things about each other, and we're also not going to like some things about each other. So the research says that you can complain. That's okay to complain. And what is it about a complaint that makes it okay? So a complaint is, I guess that's small, I'm sorry I didn't realize that, but a complaint is very specific and it's action oriented. So if I say something like, I requested the car get washed before the weekend and it hasn't been done and I'm really frustrated. This is a complaint. It was a very specific task I asked, and I'm complaining about this very specific action that wasn't done. What criticism is, it's a personal attack. It's saying something like, the car is not washed, you never do what I ask you to do, you don't care about these things. So again, you're attacking the person, you're generalizing, you're making the person feel like they do everything wrong rather than one particular thing. So other examples of criticism would be, why can't you remember anything? What's wrong with you? Why don't you care? You're selfish. You probably won't even remember to do that, when they're trying to make a repair. You're not going to remember to do that. If you can't remember to do this, how will you remember to do that? So that's an example of criticism. So remember, complaints are okay, criticisms are horsemen, and they're a no-no. So then, when criticism starts to show up, then eventually what may happen is contempt starts to show up. So what is contempt? So contempt is feeling disgusted with the other person and making comments that really show that it conveys that you are disgusted with the other person, that you really think the other person is lower than you, that you may have a better way of doing it, or no matter what the other person tries to do, they can never meet your needs and they can never be good enough. And so an example would be, the wife says something like, can't you remember to water the plants? So already there's a harsh startup here. We can say that it's a complaint, it's kind of specific, right? And the husband comes back and says, you know what, I can't remember. Can you please put a reminder for me? And then the wife comes back and says something like, yeah, if you could even remember to look at the reminder, right? So again, the husband tries to repair, and then there's another attack, and this one is contemptuous. It's like, you can't even do that, I don't trust you. So contempt can come in the form of sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, mockery, and hostile humor. It is also the worst of the horsemen. And then the third one, so again, now you've gone to contempt, and you're feeling ugly about each other. And when you're being attacked, or at least when there's one person feeling like they're attacked, what starts to happen is one or both of the parties may start to feel defensive. And so then defensiveness comes in. Defensiveness is now very natural. It is our need and urge to defend ourselves. At the same time, research shows that it's not going to be effective. So when we try to defend ourselves, it doesn't make the situation any better. It actually makes it worse. And so we don't want to try to defend ourselves. So a defense example would be, so say if I had barged in home and I had said, why didn't you answer my phone? And if I had gotten a response, something like, well, of course, I'm not going to pick up the phone because I'm taking care of your daughter, right? So that would be an example of a defense response. Or something like, can't you see I'm busy making dinner? So again, that's a defensive response. That's not what happened. The last one is called stonewalling. So again, we are upping the ante here. We've started with criticism, contempt has come in, now we're starting to defend ourselves. And then the last of the horsemen is called stonewalling. So this is what happens with stonewalling, is that the person starts to shut down, and they may be feeling overwhelmed, but basically they've had enough, and so they're now going to tune out. So there is no response in this. The wife may be saying, the wife or husband, whoever it is, may be saying, like, I need this from you, why aren't you doing this? There may be attacks coming, and the other person, again, wife or husband, whoever tends to take this stance, they will start to just shut down. Like, they may try to respond once, they may try to defend themselves, and then they're just going to be quiet. So the one person is maybe bickering and complaining, and then you see the other person has just tuned them out. Stonewalling does tend to occur later in marriages, once some of the other things have shown up. Okay, so the third one is called flooding. So this one is also very physiological. And what happens is, when you've had all these four horsemen happening and showing up in your relationships, you start to have a physiological response where one person starts to feel overwhelmed. It's too much for them. And so what are they going to do? Again, they're going to shut down, and they're going to feel defenseless. They don't know how to protect themselves. Maybe they're trying defensiveness and that's not working. So again, they want to protect themselves. We, as human beings, as an animal in a way, we do not want to feel defenseless. We do not want to be flooded with a lot of physiological responses, like a high heart rate or something like that. And so we disengage emotionally from the relationship. And I say that this is an example of divorce. Just because you haven't, if your relationship is an unhealthy relationship, and if this is happening, it may be you check out, and that's, you're living together and you're, going about your lives, and you've checked out from the relationship. So you disengage emotionally from the relationship. So the fourth one is body language. And again, this is physiological. Remember when John and Julie Gottman are doing the research, they have the monitors on them, they're measuring their blood pressure, they're measuring all these great things that are happening within our brains and within our bodies and within our autonomic nervous systems. And what they find is that people who are eventually going to get divorced, their heartbeat is between 100 and 165 beats per minute. And that is drastically high compared to a normal heartbeat, which is between 30 and 76. So if your spouse, who's supposed to regulate you and who's supposed to make you feel calm and who's supposed to make you feel relaxed, is making you feel like there's a tiger in the room, you're going to be bound for some kind of a divorce. And another thing to note is that our brains and our bodies are going to react the same way whether our spouse is telling us, you forgot again, or if there is a tiger in front of us ready to attack us. Our mammalian brain, our amygdala, does not differentiate between, oh, this is a human being attacking me, versus this is a tiger attacking me. The response to the human being is as if we're in the jungle and we are being attacked by a wild animal. The fifth sign of divorce, and this is again another critical one, it's called the failed repair attempt. And so what happens is with the with the 4 horsemen, they can predict divorce within 82% of accuracy. Now the accuracy jumps to 91% with only this particular sign within the first 4 minutes of your conversation with your spouse. So again, the question here is, when your spouse tries to make a repair with you, number 1, do you recognize it? And number 2, do you accept it or do you reject it? Now, most of us think that a repair comes in, the form of I'm sorry, I did that, and that's great. And most of us try to make a repair without saying the sorry. So earlier, I had an example of an example where the spouse was saying, can you make a reminder for me? That's an attempt of a repair. They're taking ownership that, they forget, and can you help me? And then the spouse attacks. So another example is, like, say your spouse says, I can't remember to water the plants, do you think you can remind me? And, again, what's your response going to be? So it's something like, what am I, your mother? Right, that's an example of, they rejected your repair. They've tried to connect with you and you've rejected them. Instead of saying something like, sure, I'll set a reminder, or, I can't do that, can we talk about another solution, where it's, okay, you're accepting their attempt to repair with you and say sorry. So the last one is bad memory. So when all of these things have been happening, one thing that starts to happen is you rewrite your history. All those wonderful memories you had about your early marriage and how you met and it was so sweet and cute, well, all those go away. All of a sudden you remember that he was late to the wedding, and our honeymoon sucked, and it's like I didn't like my wedding dress, and all those things become negative instead of remembering all the positive things about your early marriage. Okay, so let's quickly go through the solution because we're gonna run out of time. So the solutions they give have a really good chance of reducing a relapse rate of people going into either therapy or continuing to be in a bad marriage. So the first one is called enhancing your love maps. So here you're really asking yourself this question: how well do you know your spouse? Do you really know the little things about your spouse? Do you know their favorite food? Do you know their favorite restaurant? Or do you know, if you had to plan a day for them, do you really know what they would love to do? So this builds, an understanding of each other, and they found that happy couples really know each other very well. They know the little things about each other. They know that what would make them feel so good first thing in the morning, or if they come back home and they've had a tough week at work, what's going to make them feel good about ending their week. What would make them feel happy, or what's going to reduce their stress. Little things like that. So there are exercises that you can do to enhance your love maps to get to know each other more. The second one is nurturing your fondness and admiration. And again, here this is an antidote for contempt, feeling like disgusted with each other, or feeling like, oh, my spouse can't do what I asked them to do. Again, there are exercises where you sit down and talk about specific things with each other. So this is my favorite one, and we are at number 3, turning towards each other. So when they were in the love lab and they were looking at these couples and they were trying to see, what is it that makes these relationships great? So John Gottman had this theory that, these couples that are really successful, they must have deep conversations and really one-on-one conversations where they feel like they're spilling their guts and their heart-to-heart conversations. And they didn't find any of that. What they found is these couples, all of them, the good marriages and the bad marriages and the happy ones and the unhappy ones, were having mundane conversations. How's your day? What do you want to eat? How's that TV show? Right? Like all these small things that we ask each other. A statement here. Oh, I hate the way she looks, or whatever it is. Like we ask each other small things, and there's none of that. When you first got engaged, long 30-minute conversation, 2 hours on the phone, none of that, right? And yet some of these couples are still really doing well. So what is it what is it in some of these conversations that are making these couples have a strong, healthy relationship? So when they dissected these conversations, what they found that so as human beings, we all want to connect with other human beings. This is our natural desire. When we come to a mosque, we want to connect with our friends and with our other Muslim families to connect and to feel a sense of belonging. We go to work, we say hello to our colleagues, and we want to always connect. So what they found when they dissected these videos is that, every moment when a person is either saying something, asking a question, making a statement, saying an opinion, or maybe giving a smile or making a gesture, all of these are ways of what they call it a bid for connection. So a bid for connection is a way to try to connect with your spouse. And it's not, like I said, it's not going to be like, let's sit down and have a conversation and how are you doing? It's going to be more the everyday, a question here, a question there. So when you get in the car, after IBO, when you get in the car and you're driving home, what does your spouse tell you? Do they ask you a question? Do they make a statement? Do they ask your opinion? Do they give you their opinion? And what are you doing when they are saying these things? Are you on your phone? Are you, looking out the window? Are you in your own thoughts? Are you planning for tomorrow? Or are you responding to them? Are you paying attention to what your spouse has said? So each of these little statements, questions, comments are a bid for connection. And bids for connection can be, the actual words and verbal, and it can also be nonverbal, like a touch or a facial expression. Bids can also be, so can I go 5 minutes? I know there's prayer time.
Yeah.
Can I go 5 minutes over, or do I need to stop?
Continue. Yeah, just finish. I will finish though. Yeah.
Okay, so so a bid for connection can have different levels. There's low bid, there's low energy responses, and then there's high energy responses. So low energy is going to be like, yeah, you're still on your phone, you might nod your head or something like that. And a high energy bid is going to be when you put your phone away and when you turn to your spouse and you look at them and you say, yes, this is exactly what I'm feeling, or you give a really, really attentive response, and it feels validating to them. It feels like I hear you. So I'll just quickly go through the last three so you know what they are, and if you have questions later on, you can ask me. The fourth one is let your partner influence you. So now this is the research, this is not me saying this, but they found men that accept influence from their wives are much happier and they are living in happy relationships. So again, not me saying this, this is the research. Just going to give you a quick example. A guy goes to buy a car, and he looks at the car and finds one, and it's almost brand new, and he likes the car, he wants the car, and the last moment he turns to the salesman and he says, I have promised my wife that no matter what car it is, I'm going to get it checked out. And the salesman says, you listen to your wife? And he says, yeah, I want to stay married and I want to be happy in my marriage. And he says to the salesman, what about you? And this salesman says, well, I'm divorced, so I don't know. So this is the research, you can take it or leave it, but if you are in a power position, and if you're willing to share your power, if you're willing to let your partner influence you, your marriage will be a happier one. I'm actually, so there's one, solve your solvable problems. There's problems you're never going to be able to solve, and that's okay. And then there is this idea of creating a shared meaning, which is, an idea that Stephen Covey also talks about. You can keep going. And then this last thought that I want to leave you guys with is that if we put a lot of positivity in our marriage, and we really work on our marriage, and we really slow down, put our phones away, look at each other, hear each other, listen to each other, and try to work on listening to the bids. Is my partner trying to connect with me? Is this question a way that I connect with my partner? Then we are going to fill our marriages and our lives with a lot of positivity. And then what's going to happen is that the marriage is going to have the positive sentiment override, which is when we have a lot of positivity in our relationships, when something bad happens, then you can overlook it, then you can laugh it out, then you can, stick out your tongue and laugh about it and say like, okay, you know what, we're both being silly and let's stop fighting and let's, get over this. Or again, those problems that you will never, never, ever solve, it'll be okay to have those all your life. But if we're constantly, letting the horsemen get into our marriage and failing to notice the repairs that our spouse is making, then we're going to have a lot of negativity. And even if there's a little bit of positive in the marriage, then we're not going to be able to see it because, again, the marriage is so clouded with negativity. So I hope that you've taken something from this, and there's no time for question and answer. And inshallah, again, if you have questions for me or another time, we can make this a little.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the books that you would recommend for couples to read?
What are some books? So the John Gottman books are very good because they give specific examples and do this question and answer. One of them I think is called The 7 Principles of Making Your Marriage Work. And then the other one is the 5 steps to, if you Google John Gottman on Amazon, his books will pop up. And I'm also happy to email a list to Ira and they can send it out.
thank you, Sister Musarat. And with that, we want to extend, I guess, thanks on behalf of Program 3 for sharing your